Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of the guy watches through the Showa era Godzilla films for the first time and then immediately ranks them. Really need a better title for this. But on our first episode, I ranked the very original 1954 Godzilla. I ranked Godzilla Raids Again, the sequel. And then I ranked the 1956 King of the Monsters, which was the American revised edition of the original Godzilla. And I just wrote them down on notebook paper so I would remember. And if you watch this channel, you know I'm low tech as you can possibly be and still have a YouTube channel in 2025. So I don't know how to nor care to put any fancy graphics up on the screen. But I did kind of feel bad about not having something to show you. And I'm not sure what I've come up with here is better than nothing, but we'll see. I went to Walmart and bought a whiteboard and just made, can't even draw a straight line to save my life, but I just made a S, A, B, C, D, F tier and then space for all of them. And then I printed off some tragically small little posters for each movie. They did not include the American versions, but the 15 main Showa era films. So what I've done here is the ones we talked about last time. Of course, Godzilla was S tier. Raids Again is B, and I said for me it was like B plus. For me, that was a high B. I enjoyed that movie a lot. And these all could move around once I watched all the movies. But for right now, again, the whole point of this exercise is how does someone who is old enough to have had a lot of experience with Godzilla movies, but has just been pretty much blind to it, how do I rate them the first time through? And so for now, this is where we're at. And then King of the Monsters, 1956, there I had to write in. I did give a D, though I said, for its time, I actually think they did a really good job. I just don't really like the concept of trying to change and Americanize what was kind of perfect for its time, you know. But it's still a D. It's not an F because for what it was, I think it was well done. But anyways, that's where we were. So a pretty big spread for the first 3 movies that I watched. And I'm watching them in order of release. Except, for whatever reason, I decided to change things up a little bit this time with King Kong vs. Godzilla, which is the next film. Came out in 1962. I'm just going to let you know, I ended up taking a few weeks off in between watching these and recording this video. And so I made myself some notes. So I apologize if it looks like I'm reading. These were my real thoughts as soon as I finished the movie. I actually had my phone notes up as I was finishing the movie, even sometimes during the movie, and typed this up. But now I've forgotten a lot of what I was thinking, so I'm going to have to do some reading. But I'll try not to be too boring or long-winded. But King Kong vs. Godzilla was the next Godzilla movie. And it was a pretty big jump from 1955 for Raids Again all the way to 1962. So a 7-year gap. I decided, though, this time, I have a piece of tape on my arm. It's driving me crazy. This time I decided to watch the American version first to give it every chance I possibly could. Because I said watching the King of the Monsters after watching the original kind of killed King of the Monsters for me. So this time I'm going to watch the Americanized version first so I could judge it purely on its own merits. Then I'm going to go back and see how it was originally intended. So next is 1963's King Kong vs. Godzilla. So my first thought was, I was just shocked how much more modern this movie looks than Raids Again, which was the most recent of the main films, or King of the Monsters 1956. So much more modern looking. But then I was, well, it is 8 years later, and it's in color. You know, those two things are going to make a huge difference. So that was just shocking to me. Like, we really, if you include King of the Monsters, we only had 3 black and white Godzillas. I don't know why that surprised me a little bit, but here we are. Anyways, King Kong vs. Godzilla. It's, let's see. Oh yeah, the way, and again, I'm talking specifically about the American version. It's treated like, it's the first time we've ever seen Godzilla. Like he's been frozen in this iceberg for 125 million years. So that was a little surprising to me. Like, they're kind of pretending like nobody's seen Godzilla before. Like the first movies didn't happen. But at the same time, and again, right now I'm talking about the American version, and I'm probably combining them in my mind. But these are the notes I wrote as I was watching the American 1963 King Kong vs. Godzilla. It kind of seems like everybody does know who he is, yet it says he's been frozen in ice for 125 million years. So maybe the only way I could take it is this is a new Godzilla, but everybody does know who Godzilla is. I don't know. It was a little odd. It also struck me very quickly, this feels much more like a comedy than any Godzilla that's come before, because even the 1955 sequel, Raids Again, there was really no comedy. Like, I don't think there was any comedy in that. Certainly not in the original. But there's definitely intentional comedy in this one. One of the reporters talks about his corns for 10 minutes straight. His corns on his feet, like for 10 minutes just talking about corns. I thought that was kind of great, actually. The part with the natives, you know, who I believe were obviously Japanese actors with face paint and stuff, is very dated. That part is very, very dated. That's probably the nicest thing I could say about that. But it's a product of its time, so that doesn't mean you can dock it for that necessarily, but I just think it's worth noting. Also noted that the dubbing in this American movie is much better than a lot of other movies from that era, the dub job. But ultimately, I just noted that it feels like a huge departure from the first three movies, even counting the American King of the Monsters. Like, it's just more funny, both intentionally and not. Both. It's more funny than the original movies. When Kong stumbles down the mountain and knocks himself out on a rock, amazing. Like, I think that was supposed to be funny, but at the same time, I don't know. But King Kong, the King Kong, stumbles down a mountain and knocks himself out on the rock. My mouth just hung open. I just thought that was amazing. In every good way and bad way, that was just amazing. And everybody knows this. Even I'd heard of this, having never seen this movie until I just recently watched it. When King Kong shoves a tree down Godzilla's throat, just rams it down his throat. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. It's just a stone cold classic. And just that whole final fight is just so entertaining. Like, there's no getting around that. So the positives are that main fight is so super entertaining. Like, when you think of kaiju movie, monster movie, this is the kind of thing you think of. And I don't know if it gets much better than that. You know, King Kong falling down a mountain and knocking himself out. King Kong shoving a tree down Godzilla's throat. I don't know if it's going to get much better than that for kaiju fights. It feels like classic monster movie stuff. But the negative side is, it is so held back, whether it's intentionally funny or not, it's intentionally held back by how bad King Kong's suit is. I just don't understand. Like, Godzilla's suit is fine in this movie. But King Kong gets more screen time than Godzilla, which for me, in my ranking of a idiot who's watching these for the first time ever, that's going to hold it back. Because I love Godzilla. I don't love King Kong. I don't hate him. To be honest, Donkey Kong's my favorite primate. So for King Kong to get more screen time than Godzilla is a negative for me. And his suit just looks so rough. And I thought that's something they needed to get right. And it's just so rough. I mean, it looks like it wasn't even laundered or dry cleaned appropriately. And, you know, I know people gave, like, Godzilla's suit a hard time. Like, Americans gave Godzilla's suit a hard time because they didn't understand, like, the roughness of it was intentional. You know, to sort of look like the skin of a radiation victim. But I think that's beautiful and haunting. But I don't think that's what's going on with King Kong's suit. I think it was just maybe not shoddily made, but not prioritized. I don't know. Or if it was intentional, it just doesn't look good to me. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it's fun. So I said for me, for right now, the American 1963 King Kong vs. Godzilla. If I can find, here it is. These are so tiny, I I don't know how else to put them all on this board, though, so you be able to see them. But here it is. I guess it's the original poster. Oh, actually, this is the Japanese version. We'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to write this one in. 1963, King Kong vs. Godzilla, American version, which I decided to write first to give it every chance possible. I said it's a C tier, but it's a fun C tier. I'm not going to put it at the very top or the very bottom of C tier, but it's a fun C. So I'm going to put it like right here. So I'm just going to do Kong VG 1963. Anytime you see one handwritten, you notice the American version because this list I found only has the Japanese movies. So, good Lord, that's hard to read. Kong vs. Godzilla, 1963. C tier, and like just smack square in the middle of C tier for now. But again, a very fun C. But let's move on to actually the movie that was the original Kong vs. Godzilla, the 1962 Japanese original, which I watched like the very next night. First note, so most of what I said applies. You know, it is a lot the same movie. But the 1962 one is even more of a comedy than the American version. And I thought it was darn funny. It's more of an intentional comedy than even the American version. They took a lot of that comedy out of the American one. And it actually makes more sense. It flows more logically. Some of the stuff they took out of the American version made it not flow or quite like, wait a minute. Like what I was saying, like, they've seen Godzilla before. You can tell by the way they're talking, yet they're acting like this is a brand new monster. In the original Japanese version, I think all that just flows better. Like, it feels more natural. The natives are kind of problematic by today's standards, no matter which version you go with. But I don't have a lot else to say about this one, except I think it flows better by leaving that stuff in. I think the comedy is better, and there's more comedy. I thought a lot of the stuff was just genuinely funny with the two guys with the pharmaceutical company. Just kind of a biting critique on greed of corporations and stuff. But they were just funny and entertaining. So, given all that, instead of a C, I'm rating this one a B-. The original Kong vs. Godzilla is a B-. And my final note was, it could have been even higher, but why was Kong's suit done so bad when so many other effects in this movie are done well? So much of the stuff in this movie is done so well. Why was his suit so bad? Was that intentional? If you have any insight, please comment below. I'm not being an intentional idiot. I really just don't know. Like, was there something going on there, or was it simply a budget thing? But if it was a budget thing, why was Kong's suit the thing that was cut from the budget? Why not something else? Because there's a lot of good, for 1962, there's a lot of good effects in this movie. Like, it doesn't feel low budget to me for the era, except for Kong's suit. So it's a B-. And here we go. King Kong vs. Godzilla is a 1962. Is going into the B. All right, so some people are going to think I'm crazy. This is just my gut instinct watching these for the first time. 5 years from now, I might rewatch these and I might really shift things around. But right now, this moment, I'm putting in the B with Raids Again, but I'm putting it below. Not far below, but like right there. Because I think I enjoyed Raids Again more. It's certainly not as goofy. It's not as funny. It doesn't have that amazing fight between Kong and Godzilla, obviously. I just feel like Raids Again was a better movie. In fact, I feel like it's an underrated movie. So that's where I put it. All right, then finally today, okay, this is a big one. Finally today, so we have 1962 Kong vs. Godzilla, 1963 American Kong vs. Godzilla, and then the third one, because we're going to try to do 3 per video. I think that's manageable. The third one is a big one, Mothra versus Godzilla. Now, here's one I've heard a lot about. I think Mothra is a beautiful character. In fact, I've been trying to get one of the Super 7 reaction figures for Mothra, but she's like impossible to get right now. I didn't have any figures to show you today because I don't have specific figures to these movies yet. But Mothra versus Godzilla, 1964. So this was 10 years after the release of the original Godzilla. It was 2 years after King Kong vs. Godzilla. And it feels like it was a big deal and just a huge departure in so many ways. And all right, so my note here is, can you imagine someone seeing the original Godzilla in 1954 and then time traveling and seeing nothing in between and watching this, and all they know, this is another Godzilla movie? Holy cow. Can you imagine living in that time, watching the original Godzilla, and then just going straight to this movie? You would feel like you've lost your mind. It is wild. It is so different from the original Godzilla. I feel like it's so different from everything, even Kong versus Godzilla. When you see those twins, the tiny twins, singing and scurrying around, and you see the giant egg, and you just see all of it, I don't think you would believe this is actually a Godzilla movie. For a while, like I said, if you just time traveled and didn't know anything that happened in between, you would think you've gone crazy. So I wrote this note while I was watching the movie. I'm halfway in the movie, and so far, Godzilla feels very much like a side character, which was disappointing to me. However, right after that, the last third is pretty much all Godzilla, or Godzilla versus Mothra. So overall, I still feel like it was kind of balanced. Like, the first half is very low on Godzilla content, which I couldn't help but be disappointed because I'm here for a Godzilla movie. But then, like, the last third is all Godzilla and Mothra the whole time, just nonstop. And so the balance might be, bottom-ended instead of spread throughout, but I think it still works because the build-up kind of feels worth it. So I actually feel like the balance is actually okay, even though Godzilla kind of only happens in the last third of the movie. So in the end, by the way, I think I mentioned this last time, but all these movies are going to have spoilers. So if you're like me and have never watched these, just know that. But at the end of the movie, I guess it was intentional, but it was kind of open-ended. Like, it seemed like Godzilla just fell into the ocean. I didn't feel like, oh, Mothra definitely, or the larva definitely killed Godzilla. Like, it's either a not super satisfying death or it's not a death at all. And I'm not sure which was intended exactly. So, yeah, like, he just kind of fell into the ocean. I didn't get the sense that he was definitely dead. But overall, this one is just so wild. It's so different from all the others so far. Because, again, I'm watching them in order. I've not seen, except for 1998 Matthew Broderick Godzilla, I've not seen any of the ones that come after this. So for me right now, this feels so wildly different from everything I know about Godzilla. But they still have a lot of that tribal stuff from King Kong versus Godzilla. I thought that was interesting. Like, they can't seem to get away from that. I'm not saying I hate it. It's just a different time, It's interesting. So overall, I know this is some people's favorite every Godzilla movie is somebody's favorite, but I know this one seems to be a fair few people's favorite. I'm putting it at the very upper end of B, so B+. Because at the end of the day, there is a lot of movie here with no Godzilla. And that doesn't make an automatic bad Godzilla movie, but I don't think that could be considered a positive, that there's a lot of movie here with no Godzilla at all. And barely any Mothra for a lot of the movie too. There's just a lot of humans and not a lot of Mothra and not a lot of Godzilla in like the first half of the movie. But when it does come, when Mothra does come, Mothra has done so much better than, say, King Kong. This King Kong suit, the way Mothra was done is just so much better, so much more convincing. I love the way Mothra looks. I love the way they did the giant egg. Like, it's clearly a model in those far-off scenes, but they've clearly built something, probably just out of wood and plaster for the super close-up scenes. I love the way that's done. The larvae are ugly and kind of weird, but also I think done pretty well, to be honest. The stuff with the twins is trippy as can be. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know how that became the natural progression of a Godzilla movie, but I didn't hate it at all. I did not hate the stuff with the twins. It was just trippy and fascinating, honestly. And Godzilla himself was done well, and Mothra was done very well. So I think my main negatives are too little Godzilla and Mothra for my taste. But when they're there, it's done very well. And I think the only question I have now for Mothra versus Godzilla 1964 is, do I like it better than Raids Again? It's not better than the original, which is still my top right now, which, you know, that's not going to be a surprise to anybody. You almost need to take out the original when having these discussions to keep it interesting, because it's just about hard to even refute that it's amazing. But we're not going to. But so the real battle here, okay, not as good as the original, duh. But I like it more than King Kong versus Godzilla, either version. And do I like it more than Raids Again, though? That's the question. I like Raids Again a lot. So already, we're going to have to move King Kong down. Oh, this is so low-tech even for me. So we're going to have to move King Kong down. Let's just go and move him down to there. But Raids Again, or Mothra. Raids Again, I think, gets some points for me because I feel like I'd heard a lot of negative stuff about it, and I was very pleasantly surprised. And it's just the second movie. And it's so interesting to me the way they decided to go with a sequel to a movie like Godzilla, which I feel like if I were living in a vacuum and I watched the original Godzilla, I would not necessarily have even expected it to have a sequel. And who knew, you know, it would get so many. I don't want to cop out and just put it right beside each other, but I like them for different reasons. Mothra or Raids Again. I thought Mothra does have more iconic stuff going on. The twins, introducing Mothra herself. And it's just a very pretty movie, honestly. Raids Again is a much older film, you know. But that isn't a bad thing. It's just, this is tough. Here's what I'm going to do. And it's this close to me. For now, I'm putting Mothra barely above Raids Again. That's Mothra there. That's right there. There's Raids Again. But it's so close for me. They're both in a beast. All right, so there we go. There's the story so far. And I probably didn't move King Kong down this far, but there is a distance for me between these. So, original Godzilla, Mothra versus Godzilla, Godzilla Raids Again, neck and neck in the B tier. Both are pushing on A. Both are B+. And then a bit below that is King Kong vs. Godzilla, the Japanese original, which is still super entertaining. Then the American version, which is not as good, not as funny, and doesn't flow as well as the original, but it's still darn fun. And then you got King of the Monsters, the remake. So nothing's horrible so far, but that's where we are, from an S to a D for everything. And don't worry, when all this is done and I've ranked all 15 Showa-era movies, because I've decided for now that's as far as I'm going to go. I think originally I said I'm going to do every single Godzilla. For now, all I'm committing to is just the 15 Showa-era films. Because my board's just going to become a mess, honestly. But at the end of all this, when I decide on my final ranking for all 15 Showa-era Godzilla movies, I'll try to make sure it's a little more clear for you to read. But there we go. Please let me know your comments below. Am I way off on some of these? I mean, as far as your opinion goes, what do you agree with? Just let me know. We'll catch you next time on the Cardboard Cave.